Welcome, everyone, and happy Thursday. It is noon Eastern time here on the East Coast, and you know what that means. It is time for your favorite show on the internet, Talent Experience Live, the show that covers everything in human resources, talent management, talent acquisition, recruiting, AI, and everything in between. It is your weekly look at all of those things, and hopefully you never miss an episode because we have a great one for you here today. But before that, it is tradition around these parts to tell you who Phenom is, what we do, and how we do it. So Phenom is on the purpose of helping 1 billion people find the right job. That is the reason why we host great content like this, why we are on all of the social channels, why we do a plethora of webinars, and also why we are hosting our, I think, fifth annual I Am Phenom this April. It is coming up the 23rd through the 25th. You will not want to miss it. And while you are there, you will most certainly be reminded of how we help 1 billion people find the right work. It is through our Intelligent Talent Experience platform, which helps candidates find the right fit faster, employees evolve in their current roles and beyond, recruiters achieve next level productivity and efficiency, and managers get better data and insights through automation and analytics. So if any of that interests you at all, don't walk to phenom.com, where you will see at the top of the page a friendly little banner to remind you to register for I Am Phenom coming up in April. You will not want to miss it. But I mentioned at the top of the program, we cover all things HR, and today we have a special episode. There has been a buzz about the industry around workforce intelligence, around skills, around artificial intelligence, and we are here to answer all of your questions. If you have any that we don't ask in the show, hop in the comment section. Let us know you're here. Ask your questions. We'll get them answered, because today I have a very special guest, the real deal, John Deal himself from our product marketing team is here to chat all about workforce intelligence. John, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me once again.
Yeah, you are, I think, the most frequent guest we have ever had, and I couldn't be happier about it.
I love being the Robin to your Batman.
You are the peanut butter to my jelly, John. But we are talking about workforce intelligence today, right? We've talked about it here on this episode before. We continue to talk about it. We talked about it last year. Now it's 2024. We're talking about it this year. I want to ask you, because we've kind of both shared our stories around navigating the organization from a position perspective, right? You've had a different role. I've had a plethora of different roles, and they've changed. And when we talk about workforce intelligence and really the skills that you can apply from one position to another, that's what it's all about when we talk about internal mobility. So I want to ask you, from your journey, how much different was it for you over the past few years to change roles and find the right fit for you versus how it will be for, folks in the future, employees and candidates alike?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting journey for me here. I think, as you and I have kind of talked about before, just the data from our multiple roles is enough to fill the career pathing data set. But, growing up, my mom was always really focused on, you got to go to college. It's, if you want a job, you got to go to college. You got to go to college, right? And then, so I went to college, and she was like, you got to get your master's. I was like, when is it right? So, even just coming into this job a few years ago, it was still a focus on putting a resume together that talked about my education, my experience from a role perspective and things like that. And, all of that, I think, goes away. The way that people will be evaluated, the way that people will market themselves will definitely be more down to the skill level.
Yeah.
And so, like, one of the things that I have been doing, and I think that you have talked about before too, is like, we've started identifying, like, oh, what are the skills we're kind of learning along the way here? Let's start keeping track of that stuff, because when it comes time to interview for our next position, and when these future candidates are out in the talent pool, that's where the focus is going to be.
Yeah. We certainly have talked about it, and I imagine that has to be a struggle for organizations, right? When you get your initial batch, if you will, of skills across the organization, across employees based on what roles they're in, what roles they've had, what their background may be. You kind of can do that in as little as 2 weeks. I believe Phenom can roll that out. However, skills change almost overnight at this point, right? I can watch a video on YouTube right now about how to add coolant to my Audi. Yes, I am very technologically not inclined when it comes to car maintenance, but that's a skill that I then have for when my car runs out of coolant later, right? So we add these sort of skills on a daily basis. How challenging is it for not just organizations, but also employees to stay on top of that skill set and make sure that it's reflective of what they have learned in a short period of time, because it is so accessible?
Yeah, I think it feeds back into the whole idea of performance management and of employees working with their managers, that if it's an ongoing conversation between employees and their managers and things like that, something that you talked about on a recent episode with Jonathan about, the whole idea of the disappointment
Yeah.
and performance,
Mhm.
right? That kind of translates back into the skills conversation, because if it's an ongoing conversation around performance, then it's going to be an ongoing exercise of just identifying your skills,
Yeah.
right? It's just going to become second nature,
Mhm.
right? That it's just going to be, okay, oh yeah, let me add this to my profile, or I submitted this project, or I did this social post or whatever. Let the
Mhm.
AI automatically add it to my profile
Yeah.
for me. So I think that's part and parcel of this, is that it's not just a conversation around the technical nature of implementing skills, but it's also how these other HR processes then start to consume skills and play into that idea of, how do I keep track of my skills?
Mhm.
How do I make them visible? How do I make sure my manager says they agree with me?
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. And it's so important, because I think back to, the technology that we know like the back of our hand, right? I'll use the iPhone as an example. If you were to take the first iteration iPhone user, right, back in 2008, 2009, and hand them one of these, they probably wouldn't be able to navigate it, right? It changes over time, and it changes with every iOS update. It changes quite frequently. And to your point back with the college story, I had a very similar story where it was go to get your 4-year degree. You're going to move, successfully in your career. Is master's the right thing for you? Should you go to law school? I never had that thought if I should go to law school, but you get the idea. That was the validation of the skills, right? Now we don't need it as much, but we have to be more self-reflective, to your point, on what skills you're adding, because you don't want them to fall to the wayside, right? I think skills have a shelf life of 5 years. If you don't use something, you're going to forget it, right? So by keeping, documentation, lists, leveraging AI to keep your skill set up to date, I think is super important for your career growth. Now, as an employee, I think it's important to ask, can you put a specific dollar amount on a skill set? And I think this is interesting because of the college conversation, right? For years, it was, there are statistics on someone with, a GED and how much they make, someone with a high school diploma and how much they make, someone with a college 4-year degree, so on and so forth. Now that I don't want to say we're moving away from it, but there's less reliance on it. Do you think there is specific skills that have essentially a dollar amount attached to them?
I think that there are. I mean, I think that the ultimate goal is to get to that level of granularity, for sure. I don't think certain skills, yes, I think you could say these are worth this much, but across the board, I think we still haven't gotten there. And I think that's a big part of the problem with organizations trying to implement this kind of skill strategy, is because, like, when it comes to like budgeting,
Yeah.
like, it's very easy to budget for an FTE or a role, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're used to doing that,
Yep.
right? Like, okay, we need one more content writer, or we need, right? Versus, okay, I need somebody who can do copywriting, or I need somebody who can do social media, right?
Mm-hmm.
And right. So then the budgeting exercises gets difficult,
Yeah.
and that is what I think holds back a lot of organizations from kind of moving forward, is that they have an idea of how it would roll out from an HR perspective, but then when you involve the finance department or the managers and things like that, and they
Mm-hmm.
have to figure out, like, Okay, next year, how many skills do I need? Right.
It's true.
so, so I think it's an evolving conversation. But I think eventually, as once people start implementing this with the technology that's out there,
Yeah.
then the data can then be quantified in a way that you can assign dollar amounts to it. But it will take a little bit of time to
Yeah.
get there for sure.
That makes sense. And I think we've talked in this program, and I've mentioned it kind of job titleless positions, right? Where we are moving towards that skill set. It's going to take a while. HR typically is not rapidly moving when it comes to things because of compliance and for great reasons, right? You have to have a job title, a job description, so that folks understand what they're signing up for. But when it comes to skills in general, I think there are certain skills that maybe do have a dollar amount to them, and they're very specific positions, right? I'll bring up a mechanic as an example, right? You can hire a general mechanic, but when you go to take, I don't have one, but your Ferrari to a mechanic, it's going to require a very specific skill set. It's going to cost more to maintain, and you're going to have to pay that mechanic more because they're fluent in that machinery, right?
Mm-hmm.
Applying that towards maybe a developer or somebody who writes code, right? If you're looking for, I don't know the specific job titles, but senior Python, Cobra Snake 2.0, that's a very specific role.
You started so strong. I was like, you got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. No,
I know stick names.
like from my game, the game on my phone. But no, if you get into that very specific position, it's going to have a different dollar amount attached to it than something else. Now, I think we're trending in that direction. We're not there yet, and it's not going to happen overnight, but it's just something to think about when you're going into these budgeting things from a manager's perspective, right? Document skills, document, some of the skills that are leveraged that aren't in that, job description, so that when it comes to hiring somebody, for maybe succession planning or something like that, you're like, hey, I do need a social media person, but they just can't be, somebody who works in Microsoft Paint. We need someone who's fluent in the Adobe Suite or something along those lines. And that's going to be pricey, realistically.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason why getting down to the skill level is so important, because if you looked at a title, right? Like let's say like an AI curator, right? Like as a title, that title might have a very high price tag on it, but is there somebody else in the organization that you could upskill? Just they're 80% of the way there, right? So I certainly think that there needs to be a dollar amount associated with these skills at some point. It'll just take a little bit of time to transition to that. But that is I think the future of talent agility, is that if you don't get down to that granular level across the board, then you're just going to keep missing out.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to go back to sports right now. Basketball, right? You used to have a traditional point guard, shooting guard, small forward, and a center, as well as a power forward. Now you have people like Victor Wembanyama, who's 7'7" and doing step back threes, right? He was taken number one in the draft overall because of his unique skill set, because of his size, his frame, and he's not your traditional 7-footer. We're starting to see that throughout other industries, even in sports. And it makes sense that it's going to correlate and trickle down into where we are. Life and sports are very synonymous, John. But when we talk about getting down to the skills level, do you think that like a skills architecture needs to be in place to start to have that discussion?
So it's a good question, because obviously the more data you have, it will inform better decisions. But the tack that we are taking from a Phenom perspective is that if you come to the table with some base data set from a provider like Phenom or some other skill provider, if you're so inclined. I don't know why you would do that. Maybe we're being a little self-serving here, but
absolutely not.
The idea is that you can have a baseline of data without necessarily having like a job or career architecture fully in place yet.
Yep.
But of course, the job architecture will help refine that information, right? So that the usage of, say, like graphic arts in the marketing department is
Yeah.
different than the usage of graphic arts in, say, the product department
Yeah.
or in the documentation department, right?
Yeah.
So it will help to qualify the skills better,
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily a requirement to get started, right? The baseline of data that comes with some of this technology is enough that you should be able to get started, and then you can refine it over time.
Yeah, and we regularly refer to the graphic arts in the marketing department as the dark arts. So we are up to no good. But
You were
continue.
talking about snakes earlier, so maybe you are. Are you a Slytherin? I would say absolutely.
100%. I
You
am
got
a
a green
Slytherin.
shirt
Yeah,
on,
no,
right?
without a doubt, I bought the Harry Potter game. That was the house I chose. Draco Malfoy is my guy. Moving right along. We're talking about skills, right? In general, you mentioned you can leverage maybe a general skills architecture based on job architectures that may not align to your employee base, right? As you roll it out, it raises the question around AI ethics and leveraging, quite frankly, personal data to have folks navigate throughout the organization, right? If you have an open role, you're looking for that specific skill set. Maybe you, John Deal, didn't raise your hand for product marketing, right? But somebody saw, oh, John has the skills we're looking for. Is that a murky area when it comes to looking for individuals across the organization?
Yeah, it can be very murky for sure. It's been a fear in the past, I think, and I think it's something that companies are slowly starting to get over, and that's something that they just have to be responsible about, right? Like, we're not saying don't think about ethics, don't think about bias, don't think about data privacy. We're just saying don't let it get in the way of you using tools that are going to help your organization and ultimately your employees, right? So it's just understanding what the tool does, what is the data that you're going to collect, and just putting the right controls in place for that, just like you would, for a candidates, right, or for consumers or things like that. Like your employees, their data is private; it should only be shared for the purpose of helping them out from a career perspective, not for informing everybody across the organization that I chose a Slytherin and right. Like some people don't need to know that. But it's something that you shouldn't let get in the way of progress, really.
No, I think that makes sense, and it raises the other point of you should ask the employees first, right? And I think of you talked about candidates there. If you log onto a Phenom powered career site today, there's going to be cookies, there's going to be data tracking, things like that. But following rules and regulations that are in place for that technology, it's asking if it's okay to track that information, right? In order to serve up personalized job descriptions. And you don't have to give all of your information, but if you click on product marketing specialist and the people who also viewed that job looked at product marketing manager, right? It could be something as simple as that, but ensuring that you are getting the approval of the people at first, I think is certainly important. When it comes to continuing on the AI conversation, where do you think it's most powerful in the skills conversation, right? When we talk about AI, we oftentimes think of ChatGPT, we think of this. Is AI at the point where you can look at a person in a specific position and see or make the assumption, AI can make the assumption that they've gained certain amounts of skills, or that maybe they've lost some skills from previous roles, or what trajectory they should go on? Where does AI come into play when it comes to skills and workforce intelligence?
Yeah, so I mean the primary benefit is that it now allows you to get off the ground faster with a skills architecture, right? So you don't have to go through this exercise of sitting down with all the managers in the organization and getting out your yellow line notebook and writing down all the notes and then turning that into, right? So that is I would say the primary benefit of it. I do believe that it can help to give indicators from an employee perspective as far as how relevant are these skills that they've listed on their profile. Like you said, it's 5-year shelf life, and some like technical skills are even shorter because of the fast moving pace of that market. So I think it can help serve as an indicator as to the strength of skills, and then potentially infer other skills that the employee might not have explicitly talked about. But it's just an assistant, right? And we've kind of talked about that before, that there's always the human element of it, of self-selection, of manager selection, of colleague endorsement, of letters from their moms, whatever it might be, that is going to help them. And then it's a recommendation engine. Like that is, to me, is one of the, from an employee perspective, is really one of the primary benefits. Just still as a 45-year-old man who still doesn't want to know what he wants to be when he grows up, right? Like somebody looking out for me and helping out, even if that somebody is like a machine, like, it's, I think it just, that's the biggest power. And if the recommendation engine is being used by employees, by managers, and even by the HR team, all from the same data set, then that's really powerful.
Yeah. I mean, it worked for Iron Man, having an AI assistant named Jarvis, right? That helped him solve crime, save the world, whole nine. Big nerd here. But I wanted to touch back on that assistant piece, because 2024, last year, the hot topic around AI was that it's taking jobs, right? How many jobs is AI going to take away from full-time employees?
So 10.
Yeah.
And there you have it. All questions answered.
Yep, 10.
So the reality is, and we've talked about this in some of the workforce intelligence guides that we've put out, is that roles will go away, but that doesn't mean employees won't have opportunities to move into different roles. So, the example that we used in one of the pieces of marketing is the Industrial Revolution, right? The Industrial Revolution came around, whole bunch of automation in factories. That actually required more skilled people in order to learn how to use the machines, how to service the machines, how to do all that, right? So that is the direction we're going, where AI will take tasks away that are really menial and administrative and things like that, and leave opportunity for people to become more highly skilled and move into other roles that where they can add more value to the organization. So it's a cycle that we keep seeing time and time again in the market, and this is just the latest in an opportunity to upskill our entire workforce.
The AI industrial revolution, the AI revolution, right? And I think it matches the way that we as humans have grown, right? I look at my 2.5-year-old daughter. The way that she navigates an iPad is like Iron Man, right? Where she's moving apps around, she's scrubbing through Frozen to get to Let It Go specifically. Like, if you had asked me to what an iPad was at 2 years old, I promise I'm not an iPad parent, by the way, just preface, but sometimes
limited screen time,
sometimes you need it at dinner, let's be honest. So no, it's that skill set is not something that I had when I was a child, and it's not going to be something that her children will have in the future. But it's this moment in time where you have to leverage what technology offers in order to grow as species, right? In that sense. And maybe that's a little bit too far-fetched, but I think as we leverage technology more and more and more in our daily lives, in our vehicles, in our homes, in our ovens, I can say that woman, her name's A, and then it's Alexa. She can turn off my TV. She can turn the lights on. She can set a timer. All of these things, those used to be skills that you would have to have, right? Like, not that turning on a light on and off is necessarily a skill set, but technology is rapidly moving. Anyway, I agree. Very long-winded answer there, and I apologize.
Just imagine, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, applying for a job and not knowing how to write. And just think about that. If you were interviewing somebody and they were like, I do not know how to write.
Yeah.
Now think about 10 years, maybe even 10 years from now, hey, I applied for, I don't know how to write. Who cares?
Yeah.
You're not going to write. a thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
So
Do you know how to read? Because you might have to.
you might have to do that.
Do you know where a semicolon goes? But yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. And even like, let's take it even maybe a little bit further back. Writing in cursive, right? Does anyone know how to write in cursive anymore?
No, I mean, you don't even have to have your own signature on documents anymore.
No,
You
no,
can
they
they make it for you,
they
make it
do.
look pretty.
Check the box, and then there it
Plus,
is.
trying to write on the screen with the
Yeah, the
mouse is like
trackpad, it's a
it's
disaster.
impossible.
But you're right. Technology is changing, and with that, so does pay. Right? How does skills translate into? And we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, but translate into compensation and future pay for employees.
Yeah, I mean, I think as we kind of mentioned earlier that that skills and performance will start to go more hand in hand, right? And that there's this idea of continuous performance, and I think that that's going to be tied directly to skills as a measurement tool. You see it a little bit at Phenom, like we use competencies, so they're slightly different. But when we go through performance, it's usually tied to some rating based on a competency. So I think that you'll start to see that happen more and come more hand in hand. And then, like we talked about, once you get to the ability to put in a dollar amount on skills, then you'll be able to, I think you'll be able to really pay people more what they're worth, and and employees will be able to demand more what they're worth. But, I think ultimately, if your title doesn't change, but your skill set has, that should mean more pay. And so that needs to be, I think, part and parcel of the conversation when it comes to salary. And if you're very easily able to say, here's the skills I learned, right, using the technology at hand, and it should be a very easy conversation to be like, okay, here's the pay that those skills command.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I think pay, and we had this discussion with JD a few weeks ago, is always going to be a tricky conversation to navigate. But both organizations and employees alike have resources, whether it be the HR team or folks like that, to reach out to have those discussions, perhaps around skills and things like that. We both have very interesting career paths here, where we have hopped from department to department. We touched on it a little bit at the beginning of the program, but from an organizational perspective, from the top down, how do you think a skills forward approach changes the way an organization will operate when it comes to career pathing, right? I think of when I, started in a lot of my entry level roles, they always showcased that very linear career path, right? I started in it with a sales background where it was, you do sales, as a business development representative, then you're an account executive, then you're an account manager, whatever it may be. But it all stayed kind of in that silo. We're having discussions now where if you're a skills forward organization, do you even lead with that rhetoric, right? Do you say, hey, we had somebody who was an SDR and now they, are on our marketing team. We had someone who was an SDR and now they work in customer success, or all of those things. How is it changing over time so rapidly, and is it effective for businesses?
Yeah, I mean, to use product marketing as an example, which is something that we both have done.
Yeah.
You came into the organization as an SDR, and if I think fortunately for you, you had a relationship with somebody in marketing, and you were able to leverage that into. If people that don't necessarily have that relationship, how do they get there, right? And so that's what this skills forward strategy does, is it kind of opens the book up to all the opportunities across the organization, and not have to necessarily depend on like who you talk to at a trade show, or who you know what I mean, or who you're playing softball with, or things like that. Still have relationships with humans. I'm not poo-pooing that, but the idea of just one path is gone, right? And the benefit of a skills forward organization is that you put the power in your employees' hands to kind of choose their own adventure, right? You're laying out all the options for them, and you're saying, these are all possibilities. Where do you want to go? And you may or may not get there, but then, just like every choose your own adventure book, if you don't like the one it shows you, you go back to page 20
Yep.
and then you get to take the other, right? But so, um, when you talked earlier about data privacy and how one of the key things is being transparent, right? Like let them know, right? Like that is what this is. This is transparency at the best level, right? Just giving your employees a view into everything that they could possibly be.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And this is my opinion. I want to preface that, but I think the folks that are looking for that linear career path nowadays sometimes tend to be the job hoppers, right? And again, my opinion from what I've seen in conversations that I've
waited disclaim.
Very big disclaimer. But folks who want a linear career path often are going to, in my experience, hop from place to place to place to get that title that they want to move up in the ranks, right? When you look at an organization and wide, that's where you're going to see more navigation across departments and things like that. Especially when you look at Fortune 500 companies, they're ginormous. They have needs that most departments don't even know about, which is where AI and skills architecture is going to come into place as an assistant, as a tool. But if someone comes to your organization and is early on in their career and they say, I want to be VP of sales as fast as possible, right? That may say, all right, they're willing to do whatever it takes, right? They may, if they're not moving fast enough, find that role someplace else. It happens. It doesn't make anyone a bad person. But when you're looking to diversify your organization, taking a skills forward approach, I think is the best way to do it, because that linear path isn't as fruitful as it may have once been in years past.
Right? Yeah, and it's still an option, yes. Right? Yeah, but it's just not the only option. Yeah. And it can get a little bit murky for people who are just entering the job market. Like if they're not in touch with this philosophy of skills, then yes, their mind goes immediately to titles. Yeah. Like in order to be successful, I need to be a manager, then I need to be a director, right? And so I think there's an opportunity to educate that, that early talent pool as well, to say like, hey, make sure that, this is the way that you could move in your organization, or in your career, make sure these are the steps you want to take.
Yeah. And before you know it, you could be, 32 like myself and still not know what you want to do when you grow up. Right. So I think this has been super helpful. John, last question before we head out is, one that I think comes up regularly when talking about AI and turning it on. Oftentimes we think of it as a switch where, hey, we bought this AI product, let's turn it on, and wow, our whole system, we have a complete skills architecture. We know everyone inside and outside of the organization, what skills they can bring to the table, what their potential career path would be. We all know that's not the case, right? This stuff takes time. The algorithms take time to learn you and how you navigate through systems and what your frequently, searched positions are. How much prep work goes into it for an organization in order to leverage AI successfully? I know it can happen quickly, right? Skills architecture can be as little as 2 weeks. Is there a lot of prep required for that? And you mentioned it's not going to be ironclad, right? It's ever evolving. So how much prep goes into it?
Yeah, I think we talk to customers that are on both ends of the scale. I think we have the ones that are like, all right, I'm just going to flip the switch and make this thing right. And then we have the other ones that go like, oh, well, all my data is a mess, so let me clean up my data and then we'll turn this on, right? So, and the real answer is like not one or the other. It's somewhere in the middle. So the machine is not meant to run by itself.
Yeah.
Right. This is not a flip of a switch thing. It's an assistant. It's a really good assistant, but it's an assistant. And so there's going to need to be some input from the organization, because nobody has more context about the organization than the people that are working at it. Right. So, but that doesn't mean that input requires hours and days and months of organizing things. Right. It's like I think the analogy I used during Skills Day was like, if you have to clean your dishes before you put them in the dishwasher, then you chose the wrong dish cleaning journey.
Yeah.
Right. So, so don't think about spending a lot of time organizing data. That's why you buy the technology. Think about how you can fine tune the data on the back end. Right. I get a recommendation from Netflix, I'm going to thumbs up it if I like it, or
Mhm.
thumbs down it, just to make sure that they know not to recommend, that documentary next time.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, and I think of technology that I use every day now. Like driving. I know how to drive and get home, right? I know the roads that it takes, but I use technology as an assistant to help me get there, right? It knows where I live and what my frequently gone to locations are because I use it on a regular basis, that
Mhm.
upkeep. So it's like any technology. I love the dishwasher analogy. I grew up washing dishes in a restaurant, so any dishwasher is good in my book. But John, I really want to thank you for taking the time. I want to call out a couple comments that came through here. Jonathan Dale, yes, I did just say JD. And I think I completely agree with your comment. In order to be successful, you need to be impactful. And leveraging some of this technology that we talked about today, John, is a way to do it, right? Having AI as an assistant to help you find your next role or to find that next candidate for you is only going to help you in the long run and help you be more impactful. Is there anything else impactful that you would like to say before we hop off and sign off for the day?
No, I think that it's a great statement, and that the idea is that, again, the technology is an assistant to help you remember the opportunities you took to be impactful.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. Hopefully, we answered all of your questions around workforce intelligence, skills, and AI. I think it was a fun conversation. I do want to reiterate, however, that a lot of what we said was opinions. At least a lot of what I said. He's the expert. That's more ironclad. But yeah, it is always fun having these conversations and speculating on the future while being reflective on the past, right? We talked about previous technologies, the industrial revolution, and where we are headed today.
Yep.
I think whether we like it or not, AI is here to stay. It's not going to replace full-time employees, but it is a tool to help those employees get the best career path for themselves.
Yep. And to clarify, I also love dishwashers, so I don't want that to come off the wrong way. I think they're good folks.
Yeah, dishwashers
and machines.
and machines.
I don't want to be. I want to be inclusive.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes. Well, that does it for TXL today. I hope everyone enjoyed themselves half as much as we did. Obviously, we had a few laughs during the program. If you missed any of the episode, you can always catch the replay here on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook. If you're more of a listener, you want to listen to this on the ride home, because we do not encourage texting or watching videos during your drive. You can always listen to it on Spotify or Apple Music. The episode should be up in just a few hours. But in the meantime, I hope everyone has a safe, happy, and healthy rest of their Thursday, and we will see you next week. Thanks so much.